Today's Leeds Digital session is around implementing legal requirements within tech and how the legal industry can help or can adopt new technology and the possible security implications of that. I will not apologize for the fact that some of these points may seem totally obvious, but there's no harm in reminding people, particularly when they're implementing technology, how they should be looking at it. So I'll give you a brief introduction of the company, and then we'll look at the benefits of digital transformation, and then particularly some elements around machine learning and the use of AI in document reviewing and decision-making software, data privacy, which is obviously a key issue within the legal industry, and then a bit of a checklist of the type of things that you should be looking at when you're implementing new environments and digital transformations within the industry. And then we'll have a bit of a Q&A session. There is a poll as well that you may have seen, just to give us an idea as to where you are on your digital transformation journey. Just to give us an idea of the type of level of information you might need. So cybersecurity partnerships was formed in 2016 by a group of independent security consultants who had worked for a number of years together and separately throughout government and industry. And the basic principle was to be able to give that sort of level of knowledge and the workings that we'd done within government and large organizations to a wider audience. Security expertise is expensive. I should know, I see the size of my bills. So the idea of being able to provide that level of expertise further down the supply chain, it's one of the pressures that we've seen, is that large organizations may have expensive expertise within the organization to help with security, but then it's trying to pass that level of security further down the line. Just to make a point, we have 100% success rate with getting our customers through compliance audits for the likes of 27001 and Cyber Essentials, and the only time we lose clients, unfortunately, is when they seem to go out of business. So everybody talks about, say, moving to digital transformation. How can I best implement new systems and environments which are going to save me money, make us more efficient, provide a better quality of service? One of the problems that we've seen in other industries, and we're seeing occasionally inside legal as well now, is that people are implementing technology for technology's sake without defining exactly what the pain point is you're trying to address. Where are you going to find those efficiencies that are going to save you money and make it a better service, give you a competitive advantage? Okay. One, the other thing is as well as when implementing new solutions, a number of companies tend to modify their processes and procedures to fit the software, rather than making sure what they know and trust and how they know things work well already within the organization, and implementing those within the software in whichever way possible. Yes, there might have to be tweaks, and there's also almost certainly going to be longer term changes in the processes that you have to help gain even more advantage. But don't think it's a case of throwing everything out and starting again from scratch. Software providers will tell you they have the perfect solution, but if you've got a company that's been running for a number of years, and you know how to do things, then that is a process that you should be trying to implement, not just implementing whatever somebody tells you because that's the way the software does it. That may not be the right solution for you in that case. You need to understand as well who's responsible for what. We'll come a bit more when looking into like cloud migrations and things like that. Who is responsible for what levels of security controls within the solution? And one of the things I see with a lot of people is, as I say, it's implemented as a piece of software and this is the way the software does it. Is it usable? Does it meet the requirement that you want? There's a very old adage that a foolproof systems only gets used by fools, because if it's too hard to do something, by human nature, we'll find a different way. Humans are like water. We'll always find the easiest route. Okay. So it has to be a usable solution. And then particularly with in the aspects of security, it has to be usable and help people achieve things rather than being a barrier. That's always been the problem with information security, is that very often people see it as a barrier and something that gets in the way. Excuse me. So I mentioned about who has responsibility for what. Is the key point to understand is that you'll see at the top level of the slide, data classification and accountability is always your responsibility, whatever service you may use, whether it's cloud, partial cloud, just information, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or full software as a service. It's always your responsibility to do that. Client and endpoint protection, vast majority of the time, it's all your responsibility as well as the supplier and owner of the information. Okay. And you'll see that it gradually decreases as you go down. The obvious advantage of anything going cloud-based is that you don't have to worry about the physical security. The cloud service provider will have their data center with guards, CCTV, those sort of physical level protections, fire and protection, etc. So it's understanding and drawing that line of where the level of responsibility is. And I say the key thing to remember is that you, as the user of that environment, are always responsible for the data classification and the accountability. One of the things we've seen mentioned a lot in the legal environment is the potential use of machine learning or artificial intelligence to be able to help with reviews and decision making, etc. Yes, automation is going to save time and money. Yes, it may take away tedious level jobs from people, but there is quite a lot of guidance on the Information Commissioner's Office website regarding that level of automation in documents and the level of human review that is still required on the end of it. You can't just throw a document in to a piece of AI and throw it out the other end directly to the customer. One of the key things to remember with this is UK GDPR, which has this statement in Article 22, which says anything automated processing may produce a legal effect or similar significant effects. Doesn't actually tell you what that significant effect may be, but anything that is automated in a decision making or a level of profiling that you may be using to help define the services to customers or provide the service to customers, you need to fully understand the level of controls that you need to build around that, which will supply this information afterwards anyway, which the guidance that there is on the ICO site is very important to make sure that any profiling or automated decision making has a human review stage in it. Okay. So data privacy. Obviously, the type of information dealt with within a legal environment means that there is a high level of access controls. And as I mentioned before, if you've been in the industry for a while, you have those level of physical controls, whether it be, let's say you have CCTV on your building, or you have locked cabinets. Within those cabinets, there's, only certain people can access them and things like that. The thing is, a cloud computer is just somebody else's computer, or a cloud environment is just somebody else's computer. Yes, they're providing a service. Yes, they want you to carry on using that service, so they will build as much protection as they can around it, but it's still their box in the end, so they will need some level of access. One of the other things as well is that with cloud services, how they relate and back each other up, etc., may cause you problems if you've got restrictions on where you can store the data. Most of the big cloud services, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, have data centers across the whole of Europe, and their level of reliance is built on them being able to share data. So it may be that although your service is provided by a data center in London, for example, the backup environment for that may be in Rotterdam. Okay, or there are a couple in France or things like this. So understanding if you've got issues around where the data can be stored, finding out the exact geolocation of those environments can be very important. You can stipulate within your contract with most of the cloud providers if the data is to be moved offshore at all. Okay. Partially because of the requirements of UK government, all three of the main cloud servers have built additional data centers in the UK because UK government wouldn't allow the data offshore. So they are there, but you have to specify. You have to be clear within your contract where that data is held. And remember, that could include something like audit logs. Audit logs are very often forwarded to some central sort of server. Rotterdam, the one I mentioned, is one of Google's major security hubs and their security operations center. Microsoft have at least 2 in the US. So that if there's a chance that any of your data could be in those audit logs, they could also be transferred offshore. So as I say, be careful of how you stipulate it. One of the other things as well, I mentioned about cabinets. So obviously you've got the keys or the combination lock or whatever, the cabinets physically in your office. And data stores within cloud are very similar to that. And you can have an encryption key that obviously manages who has access to that data. It's who holds and manages those keys could be an issue for you. Key management services, KMS, like it says in the slides, are the normal way to go. But for recovery reasons, the people administrating those boxes out in the cloud may have access to them. So just be sure exactly what sort of level of key. There is a facility called Bring Your Own Key, BYOK. So you could generate the key. That does mean you have to do the key management. Generate an appropriate key. Make sure it doesn't expire. The worst thing you can do is have an encryption key or an encryption certificate that expires partway through a very important investigation or ongoing piece of work. So if you don't mind, or if you don't want to have that key management overhead of doing it yourself, then fine, use KMS. But as I say, understand that there is a very small potential, admittedly, but a small potential that administrators of that service could get access to those keys. So a bit of a checklist for when you're doing these sorts of transformations from either in-house environments or a hybrid part on premises and part cloud or whatever. is defining what your security requirements. Yes, you define the pain points you're trying to address, what the service needs to be able to provide, but build into whatever that requirement list is, the security requirements. What level of granularity of control do you want across the data? What level of auditing do you need? I've already mentioned about where the backups are held. Make sure that's defined. What sort of level of certification does that service provider have? You could have a customer come to you. We get this all the time. It comes and says, you know, here's a supplier questionnaire as to the level of control that you have over our data. Okay, so to be able to address that, you need to be able to say, well, yes, we use a cloud service, but they're certified to X, Y, and Z. It's your level of due diligence that you have to show to your customers as to what you're doing with their data and what checks you put in place. How is the data secured when it travels between you in your offices and the cloud environment is something you need to add to the checklist. Okay, whether the people have background checks. Some of these can be addressed if they've already got if the service has a level of certification like 27001 or the CSA star. But these are the questions you need to be sure that you're asking as part of that transformation process. How's it monitored? What access do you get to auditing? Whether there's multi-factor authentication. We're increasingly seeing insurance companies when they're looking to do business insurance quotes, not necessarily cyber insurance, but business insurance quotes, wanting to be sure that any services have multi-factor authentication in place. How you work that, how that's provided within the service varies tremendously. And it's an area we do quite a lot of advice for people for. What sort of incident handling, how do they check for vulnerabilities and those sorts of things. So a level of due diligence on any cloud service or any software as a service that you use, because as I said, the responsibility for the data and the accountability for the access of the data will always sit with you as the data owner. Okay, so this was a poll question that we put out. So just so I can hopefully understand a little of where you are in those transformations. If you haven't clicked on it yet, please do, just so I get, as I say, just so we get a feeling for what sort of level things are at. And I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but when we get the results from that, I'll pull those up. But are there any questions that anybody wants to drop into the chat? No, I'm worried I've done all of that spiel and my mic isn't even working.
I've got one question, Kevin, from someone who sent it me in separately. I'm just going to put it in the chat. So does it matter which cloud service we use? Is anyone better than the other?
Is anyone better than the other? Horses for courses, shall we say? Define, you need to define what your requirement is and what's available. If you use a lot of Microsoft already, then the chances are it makes more sense to look at Microsoft's cloud services, the Azure services. If you're using Office 365, then you're part way there anyway. It's how you build the rest of it. Amazon tends to have a slightly higher market share, but as you may or may not be aware, looking at some of the headlines, there are occasionally issues with Amazon, mainly because, say, people haven't taken those security requirements that I mentioned before and put them in place. We tend to find most of the larger American organizations tend to be more Google shops. Is one better than the other? No, it's horses for courses. It's trying to fit whatever you're used to. If you're more of a Google shop and you use a lot of Google Docs, etc., and things like that, then GDS is probably better for you. As I say, Amazon tends to have a lot of market share, tends to be a bit quicker to set up. But I think, say, the important thing is define what you want the service to do and then be able to look around the others. And they're not the only cloud services. There are a number of independent ones, and it depends what level you want, particularly if you're down at the infrastructure as a service level. There's a lot more organizations around doing it.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin. Just had another one come for you in the Q&A. So Leo has asked, what about archiving the data?
So archiving is as part of the backup. So obviously one of the security requirements you need to define quite early on, and you probably already have in place, to say with either physical documents or whatever now, is what level of retention you have for the documents. So there are requirements that you keep them for up to 7 years or whatever it may be, and to build those in. Archiving of data within a cloud is fine. As I say, you need to check where it's located. But if you want to pull it down into your own environment, there's no reason why you can't do that. As with all cloud services, the more you use of it. So if you're archiving a lot of data into a cloud service, the cost may go up because you're having to hold a lot of data there. So archiving it to a offsite environment or to an environment that you control back at your premises is probably a better way of doing it. Length and quality of archive, I could go into long technical debates about what's the best medium to put it on. Yes, it's not a discussion for now, but I think, as I say, defining what your data retention requirements are, and then understanding how much of that you can move to an offline environment, so the likelihood of it needing retrieving in the next X years is obviously where you set your retention levels at. Does that help? Does that answer?
I think it did, hopefully. So I've not got any more questions. If anybody has got any, just put it in the chat or the Q&A. I'm just going to go over the poll results just to get an idea. So most popular result was still planning. Second is implementing at the moment. Third, is not for us, and then a few are all sorted, just to give you an idea.
A few are all sorted. Okay. Well, it's interesting that a lot of you are planning at the moment. It's also interesting that some are saying it's not for you. That's fine if you're comfortable with what you've got. As I say, implementing technology for technology's sake is not the right reason. I'm a great believer in making sure that something fits, not just because everybody else is using it or it's the done thing now to move everything to the cloud. So from everybody, thank you for your time. Hopefully we'll see you at another event soon.
Right, thank you.